guys, welcome back to another Win-A-Box Finals video. This time Win-A-Box 15. We had 45 players come out for this tournament. It took just over 3 weeks to wrap up, and it all culminates with this finals match right here. We've got a very special occasion. We've got Selena Gomez at the top here, taking time out of her no doubt very busy schedule to be a part of this finals. I really appreciate the attention that she brings, the speed duel format. I'm kidding. This is Mike Steinman. He goes by TS Fearless in the Discord, and he's definitely known as one of the better players in the game's history, but he doesn't have quite as many accolades as he could because he takes a lot of breaks. So this is his first finals back since he started competing again, so good to see him here. And then at the bottom, we've got known by many as the best XYZ player of the format, Ursus. He's won numerous tournaments over the last couple months, and he is looking to do two things in this finals. Number one, win his third Win-A-Box final. He will be the first player to have 3 Win-A-Boxes under his belt. And then number two, he's coming into this tournament at 8-0, so he is looking to go undefeated. He will be the second player ever to win a Win-A-Box with an undefeated record, looking for that 9-0. So that's the backstory coming into this finals match. Let's get into it. I'm excited. So as always, we're going through the rock, paper, scissors here. A very important part of the game. Nobody wants to make a misplay here. Wow, they're really thinking it through. And Mike takes it with his paper. Ursus reveals the rock. Bit of a misplay. But Mike's going to get to decide if he wants to go first or second here. Most likely second. Very, very few decks want to go first. I'd almost say it's situation based, but we can see here Ursus on his signature XYZ. Mike is actually playing TP Warrior, which I looked it up. This is the first time we've seen TP Warrior in a Win-A-Box finals in the Battle City format. So the last time they were in the finals was Win-A-Box number 4. But Ursus here opening an absolutely fantastic hand for XYZ. We see the hanger come down, fetching the Y and the Z. He's got a Foolish, why not? He pitches an X with that Foolish, so he does have access to XYZ, and he's actually going to banish X and Y instead to make XY, and he also has the follow-up Scramble. But XY, decent. This is the one that pops the face-up spells and traps, which can be really useful in the TP matchup because they do run a lot of annoying or pesky face-up spell and trap cards like Nightmare Wheel, like Zoma. So we'll see what Mike's play is. He will have 5 cards to work with. How many cards does Ursus have? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So he went through 8 cards. However, he started the turn with 4 cards, and he ends the turn with 4 cards. So he has access to these 2 cards, though, because of the skill. Interesting to note, actually, about this XY is its attack and defense values are actually fairly relevant. We can see it here in Mike's hand. He's got Charging and Book. A really popular play right now for these beatdown decks is to book their Gaia because it has 2100 defense, and then flip it up on the next turn and it has 2300 attack, which is really difficult for a lot of decks to deal with. The XY, though, has 2200 attack, so it can get over a Book of Moon Charging Gaia, and it has 1900 defense, so if the Book of Moon goes on the XY, Charging Gaia can't get over it. So it does actually have a relevant attack defense, whereas had Ursus just went into the YZ purple fusion, which is the most common one to open up with for XYZs, it has 2100 attack, so it actually couldn't get over the Gaia if it got booked and went into defense mode, and then Gaia flips up with 2300 attack and can get over the YZ on the following turn. So it's this 2219 actually is relevant on top of, you know, a nice effect to be able to pop back row. He could have gone into XYZ, though. I feel like a lot of players might have just went straight into XYZ turn 1, which makes me think he doesn't want this Z banished. He wants it in the grave, so that on the follow-up turn he has X and Z, and he can banish both to make another big purple monster that also the XZ pops face down spells and traps, and it has 2400 attack and 2100 defense. Which also a relevant attack, but it's just, it can't get, you can still get over something that's booked, and it can't be gotten over if it is booked. So I think that that's why Ursus didn't go for the XYZ and instead went for the XY, is so that he can have 2 purple guys that are huge rather than an XYZ here and a X on the follow-up turn. But what is, has Mike seriously not made a play? I did all of that talking and it's still we're still at the very beginning of the turret. We're skipping. Holy, okay, we've got Breaker come down. And he's going to remove the counter here. It doesn't really matter if Breaker's at 1900 attack or 1600 attack. He's going to hit the hanger. Smart hit, just because every back row that XYZ runs is chainable. Scramble, Offerings, Book of Moon. So not really a point to hit the back row. And you see here, if he did hit the back row, Ursus would have just chained the Scramble, summoned the Y and the Z, or Y and the X, and then this Y, if hanger was still on the field, would have fetched a Z from the deck. So smart to not hit the back row. Some people might have misplayed there. But now we are over to Ursus, and he has 3 monsters on board. He's going to declare Y's effect, which will attach it to X. This will give him space to summon this X, I'm guessing. And now all 3 monsters are bigger than Breaker, so this Breaker's definitely going to be dying this turn. We'll have to see what Mike wants to do. How he wants to use his back row here. Damage is live, the skill wasn't used. So technically, game is on board here. Enough damage to deal game. And Mike, so the X declared an attack on Breaker. We've got Book and Nightmare Wheel. A little awkward. He's going to let the first one go through. This will be for 22, and this one will also be for 22. And Ursus says we'll follow up Book. So, what do we... Jesus, you're killing us with these think times, Mike. X-play, X-play. Even Ursus, oh, you there? He takes 220 damage. Interesting decision. There we go, 2,200. So he takes the first one, he gets a counter. He does have 2 counters, but Ursus strategically does not give... or got rid of all the cards in his hand. So these 2 counters, for those that don't know, TP, every time a player takes damage, you get a counter. Remove 2 counters to rip a random card out of your opponent's hand. Remove 3 counters to destroy a face-up card in the field that your opponent controls. You cannot destroy your own face-up cards. But he's going to Nightmare Wheel that X attack. He does have to, otherwise that would be lethal. And that's going to give him the 3rd counter. So what does he want to do with it? Most likely pop this XY. Interesting. Ursus does have Book, which technically he can book the XY in the standby phase, and again, TP only can pop a face-up card. So if he wanted to, he could have protected the YZ by sacrificing his Book. And then popping the X doesn't really do much because of the Y. Of course, he cannot protect either one of these monsters if they're 1800, so if he popped the X, or if he just popped the X and then swung over, he can't protect these monsters because he has a 1900 charging Gaia and this Book would be gone. So, doesn't need to protect the XY there, but he could. Here comes the charging Gaia into the X. I doubt he's going to book that. Doesn't really seem worth it. Nope, it is not. And that will give another counter over to the TP. But Ursus still has X and Y and a Scramble in the grave. And he also has a pretty big boy here, 2200 attack. Again, very relevant attack and defense. He's going to declare Y just to bring it up so that he can use it. I think that means he's going into XYZ. Just for people that don't know, the skill can use the Monster Zone in the graveyard. The normal XYZ mechanic can only use the Monster Zone and the Spell and Trap. So you cannot use the Monster Zone, the Spell and Trap Zone, and the graveyard. So he had to bring up the Y from the Spell and Trap card zone. Is he not? Did he just want to protect the Y? I guess he's banished X and Z. Okay, there we go. He's banished, so he brought up the Y so that he could use the skill to make XYZ here. That will also remove the Nightmare Wheel. And he's going to pitch that Book of Moon to target a back row. He targeted a Book. Bad hit, unfortunately. It can just be chained. I mean, not necessarily bad hit. It's more of just 1 for 1, and then the XYZ goes face down. And then he can banish a Scramble here. Can't use the... or he can normal summon something if he did banish, but I doubt he's going to normal summon. Yeah, so he's just going to add the Z to hand. And now it's back over to Mike. guess is he thinking in the end phase? What was that? Okay, there we go. There's the draw. Cyclone. Not really going to do much here. He could give himself 2 counters, but he knows it's a Z in the hand, which is basically worthless to try and discard. If it goes to the grave, it doesn't change the game state at all. Ursus still has access to it with the skill, and I believe he has a Z, or an X, sorry, to work with the Z. So not a very good top deck. Kind of almost, I would say, a dead card to an extent. But are we thinking still? Or is this technical issues? So nothing can get over the XYZ in defense mode here. 2600 defense. Swift Gaia even cannot get over it. And if he wants to summon it, he'll have to set the Cyclone. Swift Gaia can only be summoned if it's the only card in your hand. So he sets the Cyclone, normal summon the Swift. He can swing here into the XYZ just to get a counter and give him 2 counters. That might be worth it. He'll take 300 here and drop him to 13 instead of 16. I don't know if that's super relevant in terms of damage. I guess it would put him in lethal range for a Z or a Y direct attack if he's at 13 instead of 1600 life. We're thinking here. He did set the Cyclone though, so he actually cannot activate the Cyclone now. So I don't know. I guess he's thinking on whether or not he wants to crash. If this was a scramble, let's see, it would be problematic. No, he has the book. I don't know. What is it? We're going to skip ahead here. That was a very long wait. Ursus sees offerings. Flips up the XYZ. He can pitch the Z, I guess, would probably be... Yep, there we go. So we'll see what he wants to hit. He's going for back row. Here comes Waking. No, he hits another book, which is just unfortunately going to be chained. And that's going to be the end of the XYZ for the turn. Ursus does have X and Z, though, in the grave, yep, to make XZ. And he can pitch this offerings to pop this back row as well. And that will leave Ursus with the 2 biggest monsters that are both too big in attack and defense. I guess the Swift is at 23, so the Swift can get over XZ, but this guy is at 19 because it was summoned using its effect. So Ursus will have the biggest bodies on the board. Skill was used, so no battle damage this turn. XY goes down. That will cause Cyclone. He's going to use the Cyclone now, so it goes down to 600. That will banish this Book of Moon. And give Mike 2 counters, but unfortunately, yet again, it's back over on Mike's turn with 2 counters, and Ursus has no cards in his hand. Shrink. That is not going to do anything. Okay, so I think it's the only play here to not lose the game is set the Shrink. And then... yeah, set the Shrink. And then Ursus needs to top deck something dead, and then if he top decks a monster, Ursus wins. But if he sets the Shrink, and then Ursus attacks in the wrong order, if he attacks with XYZ first, it'll die to the Shrink, and then XZ over Gaia is not lethal, it's only 500 damage. And Mike will see another turn, and he will have 3 counters to pop. So we'll see what Ursus gets here. He gets a monster, it doesn't matter. None of it matters. He sees the monster. We'll see if he pitches it, though. He could. No, it'd still be lethal. If he pitches the Z here, he can just target the Shrink. And I guess he could have done that from the very beginning, so there wasn't really any hope. But yeah, so, and he does attack with the XYZ, but it doesn't matter at this point, unfortunately, because the XYZ can die, but then XZ and Z together will end the game. So that is going to be game 1. I'm not sure what we're thinking about here. Right, yep. Unfortunately, no. There we go. Okay, game 2. Into the side, probably the #1 way to try and deal with that. So winning the first game against XYZ can be huge because there are so many cards in the sideboard that can then deal with the deck, and you only have to win one of the next 2 duels with all of those side deck techs. So Ursus taking game 1, always important in my opinion, for XYZ players to win that first game. It can be huge if you not only have a very anti-heavy or anti-XYZ heavy sideboard, and you win game 1, because from there on you only need to win one of the next 2 games to get the match. But, and we can see here, Ursus already done siding, Mike still not done, taking in, possibly deciding what he wants to take out, but definitely in some anti-XYZ cards coming in. There we go. Done siding, Mike is going to take second, Ursus first again. And there's the hanger, exactly what Ursus wants here. So, TP comes up at the start of the duel, you do have to do that, though it's not easily repairable game state if you forget to do that. But hanger comes down, there's the YZ now. I think I bring it up almost every time XYZ is in the finals, but he did not banish his YZ, which means that this card, if you're playing against XYZ, near 99% chance it is not Union Scramble if they do not banish. Because very rare, they do not want to set their Union Scramble here and just have it get breakered or cycloned, or lose the scramble to just random things and then kind of just lose the game because of it. So Mike will at least be working with that information. Down comes the Cyclone. What will the target be? He is going to hit the back row. Okay. He does have Breaker, which can come down and pop the Z and swing over the Y. Ursus, however, does have the X. So he didn't see Scramble, but he does have X for a follow-up XYZ. Next turn, if he wants to go into that, he has all the pieces, so he can make any of the purple boys that he wants. And a Foolish Burial, not really necessary here. He does already have, Ursus already has access to all the pieces. But it looks like he is going to go ahead and Foolish. He's going to Foolish an X. So I guess he wants to use the XYZ and the Grave, and then he can normal summon X. I guess he can protect, or he can have 2 cards to discard, but he would have had 2 cards to discard if he kept the Foolish. So I think he wants to go into XYZ and also be able to use this X. So he's going to use Foolish Burial to pitch another XY, or X. It also does deck then, technically, so down to 12 cards now. Mike's still at 15, even though Mike went first. Meaning that he sees 5 cards and Ursus has to start with 4. But there's the XYZ. He's going to pitch the Y. Or sorry, he pitches the Z. I was looking up here. Pitches the Z just to pop a card before he decides if he wants to pitch this X or summon the X. I think he's summoning the X, but just pitch the Z, see what happens, see if this XYZ dies or something. He does hit, which one did he hit? Okay, so he hit Nightmare Wheel. That is actually, I think, a pretty big hit. He between the Nightmare Wheel and this, if he hits Zoma, maybe Ursus pitches the, I guess maybe it doesn't matter, but the fact that he hit Nightmare Wheel is actually a pretty big hit. And he's not going to pitch the X, he's going to summon it, because here, if the Zoma was hit instead and the Nightmare Wheel stayed, on Mike's follow-up turn, he could Nightmare Wheel the X, and then pop the XYZ off the 500 burn from the Nightmare Wheel, because he would have 3 counters. Now there's no battle damage here, so he will not get 3 counters off here, versus use the skill to make this XYZ. So hitting the Nightmare Wheel was actually a really good hit. 50-50, but really good hit. I'm not sure if, though, maybe because he saw the Nightmare Wheel, he decided to summon the X, or if he hit the Zoma instead, he would have summoned the X either way. I don't know. And then down goes Bright. What was Mike thinking about there? He only has Zoma. He can't stop the attack. I guess thinking on whether or not he wants to flip up the Zoma. Yeah, he is not going to flip up the Zoma. That may tell... or I guess he said think so. Ursus might still not know. He waited a little bit in the end phase, so maybe could tell that he had Zoma, but... Or could give away the information that he had Zoma, but... Maybe the think was just a bluff to make Ursus think that he had something. He didn't summon his Zoma, which to me is actually kind of relevant, because Zoma being summoned here wouldn't do anything. It doesn't change this board state. He summons Charging Gaia, gets over the X. The Zoma, I guess he could throw it into the XYZ, but then that would be horrible in the follow-up turn. because now Mike has nothing left. So, and now we're actually in this scenario where he kept the Zoma face down and he said think during the battle phase. So, Ursus might actually be stuck here. Like, he might be sweating this back row card, even though it is a near dead Zoma. It's not really going to do anything. So I think that that's probably the correct thing to do, is just not summon the Zoma. Because he could have summoned it on Ursus's last end phase. He could have flipped up the Zoma, but he didn't. And he also tried, I think this was a bluff think here, where he's like saying think just to make Ursus sweat that this is a battle trap and not a basically dead Zoma. So, and we're seeing it work. Ursus is taking quite a while here. He says, for sure shrink set. So there you go. Are you for sure shrink set? For sure? It is actually Zoma. So the bait did work. And Ursus thinks that this is shrink now, which may change how he plays, which may end up causing a misplay, but we'll see. Interesting observation, says Mike, but we're going to try and fast forward. This is a long time. Yeah, we got a pee break. Back already. I guess I clicked next play, so I don't know how long that pee break was. But he does have the XZ in the grave to banish for XZ here. No damage though, because of the skill. And he's going to look to pop that shrink. What he thinks is a shrink, he's going to sacrifice his Book of Moon for it. And it was actually a Zoma. So was that lethal? Right? Because if this swings 19, that was 9. So Ursus had game on board. Or sorry, never mind. What am I talking about? He doesn't do damage. Never mind. No damage. So he does see a shrink though, and he has 3 counters, which means he can clear this board this turn, and it'll be up to Ursus to top deck out of it. Does he have no scrambles? But that only means that he's due for a scramble. 11 cards left, and 3 are scrambles. Assuming he didn't take one out, which I don't know why he would. But Mike does have the cards to clear the board this turn. Interesting enough, he actually has to shrink first, then normal summon the Gaia, because Gaia cannot be normal summoned unless it's the last card, or the only card in your hand. So, yeah, he'll have to shrink, then normal summon the Gaia. What are we thinking about here? What is there to viewing? Banished? I feel like the play's pretty straightforward. Might just be information gathering here to see what possible plays Ursus has next turn. So Shrink comes down, that puts the XZ at 12. Gaia comes down at 23, that's going to be 11. And then it's back over to Ursus. 1 counter on the TP. And he's going to need something good to get out of here. Offerings. He doesn't need to use it. He can wait a turn. He does have 2,900. But if Mike sees a monster here, this is game and we'll be going to game 3. Mike thinks, probably thinks it's a scramble, but there is a way. He has 3 scrambles in the deck, and he's got 11 cards left, so statistically there was a really good chance of him seeing 1 scramble already. But instead, Mike sees a Diffusion, which actually is a side-decked card, one of the side-decked cards that you side against XYZ. So if he sided out a monster for that Diffusion, ironically, that may have actually cost him the game. But Ursus lets the 23 go through again, doesn't need to Offerings that turn. He sees another Offerings though. But 2 Offerings you can stack and only skip your draw phase once. So he's gonna Offerings right away. I guess that might, I don't know why you couldn't wait until the next turn, but down comes the Offerings. Ursus will be skipping his next draw phase. But Mike does not see anything. Mike looking for a monster. Nightmare Wheel, Shrink, Diffusion. He's loaded on back row. Over to Ursus. Ursus actually sees the first monster of the 2, and Y is going to be a good one. Was that his only monster left? I think he has a Z left. Yeah, he does have, yeah, he should have 1 Z and 1 Y. So exactly 1 Z and 1 Y left for this play. Normal summon the Y, the Union Hanger will fetch the Z here. Some XYZ players do not run 3Z Metal Tank, or they take out the 3rd Metal Tank. They side it out. In game 2 and 3, you're seeing why you run 3Z right here. It's because Ursus did draw into, did he draw? Yeah, I think he drew into, or maybe he started with one of the Z's in his hand. And that would mean that without a third Z, this play wouldn't be possible. This Y would be at 15. So you're seeing why you played the third Z. So here we go. Mike can either let this go through. Ursus did not fusion off, which means he's possibly playing around diffusion. But it's also just generically good to have a Y attached with a Z here, because this damage would give Mike a third counter, which would just immediately pop the YZ if he went into the purple voice. So, and I guess it also plays around Nightmare Wheel. This Nightmare Wheel won't stick around, and Ursus is at 100 life here. But yeah, it also plays around Nightmare Wheel, diffusion, and the TP counter. So, not really. Again, Mike has got the counters, but Ursus doesn't have a hand. Well played from Ursus to, I guess sometimes you know, you can only play the cards that you're dealt, but it is well played to make sure that it always goes to Mike with no cards in hand. Sometimes, you know, if you get a bunch of monsters in your hand, you can't, there's nothing you do to play around that, but, so it is kind of, you know, it's not all well played. A little bit of it is luck to just be given the cards to manage your hand and be able to set everything. But yeah, here we go. So we see the YZ get banished to remove the Nightmare Wheel. That would have been lethal next turn. YZ comes down, and it was not used, or not summoned via the skill. So Mike can either decide to diffusion this here, or he can take the 29, and I guess it would give him an additional counter, not really worth anything. But Mike has 2 diffusions, which was actually not, this diffusion was not a good draw. This one, fine. This one, bad. I think he wanted something else here to keep pressure down. Something big, I think would have been nice. A monster. Scene 3, so he should still have a couple left. I think this is not an upside down 9. He has 9 cards, so this should go down to 8. But he's going to take the 21. Interesting. He has 2 diffusion, and he is getting beaten down by a fusion. Interesting. Overcaps his counters here. Fortunately, won't get a counter for that attack. TP can only hold 3 counters. Sees a Zoma. Actually, is that lethal now, taking that 21? I don't know if it would have mattered if he... Maybe it does. Maybe it matters, but I think taking that damage there, so he removed the counter. Yeah, I think that's lethal now. This will get back X, Y, and Z. He only has a Zoma to stop 1 attack. Diffusion is dead, and Shrink. And he has offerings to stop the 1 Zoma. So yeah, this is game. The players may not know it now because we are all seeing, we have access to both players' hands. But this is game. So Ursus with 100 life left is going to win game 2, take the finals 2-0, and get his 3rd win-a-box. That's 3 win-a-box titles for Ursus. We've only had 15, which means this dude has won 20% of the win-a-boxes at this point. And I don't even think he was playing in all of them. I think, oh, you disconnect. Oh, never mind. Okay, he's back. I was about to say, what a way to lose. Disconnects, loses game 2, and then loses game 3. Almost spoke too soon. Maybe that's why Mike stalls. I guess it's Ursus' turn. He's the one waiting. But this is going to be lethal no matter what happens here. But Ursus has won 20% of the winner boxes. I don't think he even played, and like, I don't think he started playing until Battle City box. So he wouldn't even have started playing until at least winner box 5. So he's only been around for 10 of them, and he's won 3. So technically he's won 30%. There it is. That's the game. Ursus takes it 2-0 against Mike and TP Warriors. But Ursus has won 3 of, I think, the 10 winner boxes, because he didn't play in the... I don't think he started playing until Battle City box, which would have been winner box number 5. So 20% of the winner boxes total, almost 1/3 of the winner boxes he's played in. Absolute dominance from Ursus with his XYZs. Huge congratulations to him, of course. Welcome back, Mike. Congratulations to him for making the finals. I believe he was also eliminated in the semifinals last tournament. So top 4, top 2, maybe next one mathematically is the time where he gets first. But that's going to do it for this winner box. Let's go ahead and get into the deck breakdown now and take a look at some of the other decks played throughout the tournament. All right, guys, and here we are with our deck breakdown. Different day, but here we are nonetheless. As I mentioned before, we had 45 players come out, and we're going to get this started bottom to top, starting here with Spellproof Armor. 0 for 1, again, no tops. Interestingly enough, Spellproof Armor has never made it into the top 8. of a win-a-box. I think it's topped once or twice, but it's only ever been whenever there's a top 16, which we do whenever 64 plus people sign up. So Spellproof Armor has topped, but it's never made it into a top 8, and it's not going to change for this win-a-box. 0 for 1. And then we see this slew of inner conflict decks here. We see Beasts, Burn, Fairies, Spellcaster, Warriors. It really just kind of shows the versatility of the inner conflict skill, as well as the Cocoon skill with Moth decks. We've seen Moth Relinquished. I think we saw Moth Gaia at some point. We've seen Moth Dark Magician, Moth Magnets, Moth Warriors, Moth Gravekeepers, Dark Moth, OTK focused Moth builds. So 2 very, very versatile skills in this format, but none of these decks topped because they are all bad. So moving on. I'm kidding. But no tops here. And then we've got a Gravekeeper build. Good to see them back. Haven't seen them in a while. Unfortunately did not top. Dinos in the format. Somebody did sign up with Dinos. Did not top either. Like Gravekeepers and Dinos here. What is the Scars format? We've got TP Burn was able to sneak into the top cut here. It didn't go any further. It was out in the top 8. But we may have to prepare for more Burn players going forward off that top. And then we have Relinquished here, 0 for 3, Magnets, 0 for 2. I always kind of put Relinquished, Magnets, and Spellproof all kind of in the same category of just fun decks that people will always play, but never really seem to do anything big. So we'll see, though. I've seen some interesting Relinquished builds online. I know Magnet players are always testing stuff. We'll see if Spellproof Armor players come up with anything. But then we got to move on into the upper echelons, and we see here at the bottom of the upper echelons, XYZ Unions. Usually XYZ Unions is at the top and one of the most played decks, but here it's technically at the bottom. I guess it's tied for 3rd here at 6, 5, and 4, but it is technically the 6th deck here on the list. But 1 of 4 topped with it. That one player, of course, being Ursus, who did the XYZ Union community proud by going all the way, winning the event, undefeated, getting his 3rd win-a-box victory. So congratulations again to Ursus. TP Warriors, 1 for 4, which is not the best showing in terms of topping the event, but it did go all the way to the finals, which is the best showing for TP Warriors in the Battle City format. No TP Warrior deck has made it to the finals of a win-a-box since the Battle City released, so good to see TP Warriors finally breaking into the upper echelons. It's been eliminated in the semifinals, I want to say like 3 or 4 times, so nice to see it finally at least make a finals. We'll see if it can continue that, maybe possibly win one here eventually before the Battle City box format ends with the release of the GX box at the end of February. But now it starts to get a little bit more interesting. We've got Dark Moth here striking out in win-a-box 15, 0 for 5. This has happened before. I think they went 0 for 6 in win-a-box 9. It is a deck that relies on pieces. So if everybody who signs up with the deck don't see the pieces whenever they play, nobody's going to top with the deck. So I think that this can happen with the deck, right? But what's really interesting is Apprentice Monarchs being 0 for 5, because Apprentice Monarchs is a consistent deck, and all the Monarch variants are fairly consistent builds. So the fact that nobody topped with Apprentice Monarchs is more interesting. I guess the one top here with TP Burn was stolen. It could have been Apprentice Monarchs and it was stolen by TP Burn here. I don't know, but the fact that nobody topped with that, I don't think that's ever happened. And Apprentice Monarchs actually had some things going for it over the last couple months. It was being played more often than IC Monarchs. But 0 for 5. Very interesting. With these top 2 decks here, we may be seeing a changing of the guard here going forward. So whenever the Battle City box first started, IC Monarchs came right out of the gate as a preferred deck, because it was just an obviously good deck. Once we saw things like Jinzo and Kaiser Glider, and Dark Ruler Hadez, and even Gap to an extent, Blowback Dragon. IC Monarchs was super simple to build, super simple to play. But eventually, once Dark Moth was sort of perfected and came back around February, March with Andre Aguirre piloting the current iteration of Dark Moth, we saw people swap over to Apprentice Monarchs, because Apprentice Monarchs can set Apprentice Magician, which just gives you more safety against the Dark Moth play, or against the Cocoon play. But now we're seeing IC Monarchs actually kind of take the throne back as the premier Monarch deck. We're seeing Apprentice Monarch strike out 0 for 5, Icy Monarchs won last Win-A-Box, and now here they are again with more people playing it and more people topping compared to Apprentice Monarchs. So maybe prepare a little bit more for Icy Monarchs compared to Apprentice Monarchs going forward. And definitely prepare a lot more for Beatdown Moth going forward over Dark Moth, as we're seeing more people play it and much more, or many more people, a lot more people top with Beatdown Moth here. So last Win-A-Box 14, Beatdown Moth had 2 people play it, 2 people top with it. Both those players were top 4 and top 2. They ran into each other in the top 4, so maybe if they're on the other side of the brackets, it's an all Beatdown Moth final. I don't know. But Dark Moth had 2 people top out of 10 people playing it. And so I definitely think Win-A-Box 14, Beatdown Moth outperformed Dark Moth despite having way less people playing the deck. And I mentioned, that we would keep an eye on Beatdown Moth and see what it does going forward. Well, here's Win-A-Box 15, the very next Win-A-Box, and it's clear 0 for 5, 3 for 6. We may actually see 8 months after Dark Moth rears its ugly head in the format, we may actually see a new build be the preferred way to play the Cocoon skill, with Beatdown Moth taking 3 of the 6. So Beatdown Moth possibly overtaking Dark Moth, Icy Monarchs taking the throne back from Apprentice Monarchs, Ursus getting his 3rd Win-A-Box title. He now has won 20% of the Win-A-Boxes. And then TP Warriors making its first final appearance of the Battle City Box format, I think are 4 stories that you can take away from Win-A-Box 15. So interesting Win-A-Box for sure. But that's going to do it for this video. If you guys would like to get in on these tournaments, the largest Speed Duel tournaments going on, the Speed Duel League Win-A-Box, we host a new one on the 3rd day of every single month, which means Win-A-Box 16 is going to be starting November 3rd, which gives you just a couple days to sign up for it from the timing of this video. You can sign up by joining the Speed Duel League Discord. The link for that will be in the description below. If monthly tournaments are not your thing, the Speed Duel League also now has a weekly tournament thanks to Rook's table. That is going to be the Speed Duel Showdown. That takes place every single Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can sign up for that in the Speed Duel League Discord as well. So that is going to do it for this tournament. I hope you guys enjoyed Win-A-Box 15, and I will see you guys in the next video.